Hello. Gosh, I'm doing one of these what does nature mean to you conversations every night this week and next week. I had no idea that this is how it would go, and feeling very, very lucky and very grateful for everyone that's joined me so far. So tonight is the 9th conversation, and I have Lucy Jones, who is an author and journalist, and technology works for us tonight. Should be joining me any minute now. Lucy wrote the book Losing Eden, Why Our Minds Need the Wild. And there's Lucy.
Hello, hi Ruth.
Hello, hi. I always
Hi.
get excited when this works every night.
Yeah, I know, it's like kind of magic sci-fi, isn't it?
Thank you so much for joining me, Lucy.
It's a
really
pleasure.
grateful. I have literally just finished your book. I was determined to make sure I'd read it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for reading it.
It was an absolute pleasure. I know we'll probably talk about all sorts of things tonight other than my 3 main questions, but just reading it, it kind of feels like it's summed up a lot of what I've been speaking about, or well, my guests have been speaking about throughout the week. So
that's lovely to hear. Yeah, I'm sure you know a lot of the research that I included for your work as well, so it's nice to hear it's getting out there, and yeah, thank you for reading it.
Oh no, thank you. I mean, I wonder maybe at the beginning, for anyone watching now and people watching it later, whether you might like to introduce yourself a little bit more of what you do and perhaps how you came to write the book.
Yeah, sure, thank you. So yeah, I'm a journalist and author, and my most recent book is Losing Eden, Why Our Minds Need the Wild, which is up there with the lovely blue... Oh no, sorry. I can't really work out how to have headphones in and it not to fall over.
Sorry, they connect at the bottom, don't they? And then you can't quite get the...
Exactly. I'm not very tech savvy, sorry. I'm going to hold it. Yeah, so my most recent book is Losing Eden, and that is about kind of how and why nature affects our minds and our mental health. So it's a scientific inquiry up to a point into the latest research and evidence into why we need nature, but then it gets a little bit more kind of esoteric, and I don't know, I think there are certain things about the relationship between people and nature that you can't prove in a lab. And I'm a freelance journalist, so I've mostly been a science journalist for the last kind of 6 or so years. I write for The Guardian and the BBC and Sunday Times and kind of all sorts of people. My first book was Foxes Unearthed, which is about foxes and our relationship with them. I live in Basingstoke in Hampshire and have a couple kids. Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, maybe we'll go straight into the first question. So part of this What Does Nature Mean to You series, I've been asking the same 3 questions, but getting sort of very different answers, I guess. So the first one being, what was your earliest memory of connecting to nature in some way?
I've been thinking about this since you kindly invited me to join you, and one of my very first memories is from, I think when I was about 3 or 4. We were living in Cambridge, in a kind of flat with a shared garden. My dad was teaching at the university, and one of my first memories is being stung by a bee, stepping on a bee, and I think that's probably quite common, actually, that being one of the first memories, because it's quite a kind of intense experience, isn't it? But I guess I kind of mention that because I don't remember obviously much because I was very young, but I don't remember being scared or kind of frightened or freaked out. And I love bees and have loved them ever since. But I think that in a way it kind of, there was something about the experience, you know, which planted a seed maybe that, you know, nature is bees stinging us, or it is, it's not just the kind of really nice stuff, it's quite a complex relationship. But I suppose the kind of the place where I connected to nature as a child was in Scotland at my grandparents' house. So they lived next door to a wood, really remote, rural, wild Galloway. And I was able to just kind of spend time in that little woodland on my own and climb trees. And there was a tree house, and I just remember it being a very, you know, what young children are like. It was so tangible. Like I was always kind of touching slugs and picking up leaves and smelling them, and kind of, you know, listening to the birds and making potions and all that stuff. And that still feels, even now, kind of like a home in a way. You know, so yeah, I think those were my first experiences.
Oh, lovely, thank you. It's reminding me of my chat that I had last night with Indy Green, who is a teenager, a 15-year-old, who has grown up on the edges of Sherwood Forest, and again talking about having that access and that freedom to be able to play and touch and get muddy and dirty, and what that can mean, which I guess leads me nicely to my second question of what does nature mean to you, and has that changed this year?
Yeah, I think nature means a lot of different things to me. I think I was disconnected from nature in any form apart from, you know, because nature gives us our breath and our food and everything. But I was living a very urban kind of indoor life as a music journalist in London, and then reconnecting with nature kind of after a period of illness was the kind of genesis for Losing Eden, and set me on a kind of journey to try and find out how and why is connecting with nature so therapeutic. And I guess at that point, nature to me meant taking these daily walks on Walthamstow marshes in London, where you know, spotting kestrels or spending time with the trees or just watching a pond, even though I didn't really understand exactly what was happening to my nervous system or brain or my psyche. It felt kind of like as powerful as the therapy I was having or the medication I was taking and so on. So it's been a real journey for me, kind of what nature has meant over the last 8 or so years. And I think I have quite a broad definition, and I feel quite, I don't know, I feel quite a pushback against the idea that nature is just this kind of pretty twee chocolate boxy thing, you know, that we kind of visit. Like for me, I like my baby is nature, like I'm nature, you know, the rats who sometimes visit my garden are nature, and just as much nature as a beautiful puffin is, or you know, unfortunately the maggots we sometimes get in our bin is nature. So I think that kind of quite interested in nature as something which predominantly for me it brings me incredible positivity and in so many ways, kind of companionship and awe and wonder and tranquility. But I'm also quite interested in nature as, you know, the kind of full complexity of it, like the disgust I feel over the maggots, or the boredom I feel with pigeons. So I'm quite interested in, as I kind of go along in my relationship with the natural world, kind of thinking about the broad spectrum. But I guess on a day-to-day, whereas before writing Losing Eden, I might have thought connecting with nature is a nice thing to do. It might make you feel a bit better. It's pretty. Now it is as important to me as getting a good night's sleep, or, you know, eating a varied diet. And particularly this year with lockdown, it has become a kind of non-negotiable part of my day. And I think probably before I started to research all the science behind kind of nature and mental health, I suppose I probably had the perspective, which I think our society has too, that nature is nice. It's like an added extra, you know, it's a bit of a luxury. It can kind of be kept in the margins of our, you know, highly industrialized society. And it's nice for a bit of kind of self-care if you can get it. Whereas now, and this year, I think really brought that home to me. I know that personally I need it, like I absolutely need it, but also that as a society we need it. And I think we're living at a time of unprecedented disconnection from the natural world, and we've kind of pushed it so far into the margins that we've kind of forgotten that we are it and it is us. And you know, the evidence is now proving to us what I think so many of us probably intuitively know. You know, we recover from stress more quickly and more completely in the natural world than we do in built environments. There are so many different pathways that brilliant scientists in hundreds of countries across the world have been measuring and kind of thinking about, from, you know, how the smell of petrichor, which is the scent of the earth after it's rained, how that affects our brain activity, to the fact our nervous systems are more balanced in green spaces, to the effect of birdsong on our kind of stress hormones, and so on, to the impact of fractal shapes, which is one of my favourite elements of the science that I looked at. Fractal shapes are found kind of all over the place in the natural world, and some really interesting research from California shows that when the human eye looks at a fractal shape, so these are kind of, you know, trees, leaves, salt flats, lightning, fractal broccoli, it triggers brainwaves associated with calmness and relaxation. So I think it's interesting that now we have this huge, growing, fertile evidence base and scientific literature, which is proving to us that we need nature, and it has these very powerful therapeutic effects. But it's interesting that we've kind of come so far, we're so estranged, that we need the science to kind of show us that. And I guess, yeah, just thinking about this year particularly, I think I kind of made a conscious decision at the beginning of lockdown that we were going to have to get out for a walk every day, whatever happened. And that has kind of been my main sanity strategy, is just making sure we get into the woods as much as possible. And then in the last few weeks, it's been quite a strange time for me. I lost a close friend. So I've been in a kind of grief for the last few weeks, and nature has become something completely different in that time. I've been gathering moss kind of obsessively in the last few weeks and drying it out at home. And then, I don't know if you've ever done this, Ruth, but it's amazing. You can collect moss, just put it in a Tupperware or something, dry it out, and it becomes really kind of decrepit and dull. And then you put water on it, and it comes back to life, and it goes really kind of glowing green and kind of plump. So I've been, I don't even know how that relates to what has been happening in the last few weeks, but I feel that nature, the deeper I get into my relationship with it, the more I can see how I can learn from it or take sustenance and comfort in so many different ways. And I'd never kind of experienced a grief like this before, and that's just shown me, you know, how much succor and kind of comfort it can offer.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And there is something from you just sharing that very personal experience that you're going through now, and the grief that you're going through now, um, and also moments in your book that you were talking about the different experiences that nature can hold for us, and perhaps we don't need to always use words to describe what that is doing, and just letting it be. So whatever now your experience, your connection and your exploration with this moss, in some ways it's just going with that, isn't it? And that intuitive whatever that's feeling that you need. And it, I guess that almost takes us, I guess, in that full circle, as you said, of we probably innately knew and used to know that nature gave us so much, and we are part of it, and now we need the science to prove it, to go back to what we originally were doing anyway. And it was funny, even reading your book, I felt that journey. I mean, I'm aware of a lot of the science of why I offer what I do with forest bathing and nature connection in that way. My partner is a conservationist, and so we often have quite interesting discussions about that balance of connecting with nature and what it can provide with us, but also how do we then protect and joining that connect and protect, and how to engage people and take and give, and that equal relationship. And certainly your book, and listening to you now, it feels like it kind of sums up a lot of that. It's all the science and the research that is actually just really affirming how important it is for us, and that is to feel to joy or relaxation, calming in the nervous system, but also experiencing all the other feelings as well, and dealing with perhaps with loss, with grief, with facing, as you said, also interested in the perhaps the smelly, the dirty, the the grim parts of nature as well, and what we can learn from that. And again, probably what we used to know or used to learn, and what wisdom we used to pass down to. And yeah, I'm rambling away now because I was getting excited talking about it. But
Absolutely, yeah. That resonates so much. And I think that there's the kind of the metaphorical side of the relationship is sometimes kind of beyond words, like you say. And in Losing Eden, I found it quite helpful to, I did some interviews I loved doing with people like the chief druid, druidry being kind of a nature-based spiritual practice, and a wonderful psychoanalyst called, psychotherapist called Mary Jane Rust, who's kind of been at the forefront of the kind of ecotherapy discourse, and looking into the kind of the work of Jung as well, who wrote a lot about kind of the human connection and disconnection with the natural world. And I think that it was important for me to include both those kind of aspects in Losing Eden, because while I absolutely love all the science, and it was really exciting to kind of walk into this incredible field of science, like you just said, there, the kind of metaphorical and the more kind of psychoanalytic aspect to kind of your connection with nature can be very hard to measure and explain. And I've had some experiences in the natural world which I can't even put into words, and actually that's fine. I think as much as I'm a writer and I love words, there are some things which are beyond words. And I love watching my 18-month-old and my 4-year-old, well, before they were talking, when they were pre-verbal, it was so interesting to see them react to nature, not having any of the kind of, I mean, obviously they had me as an influence, so I probably, I was obviously influencing them by taking them to these places, but they didn't have any of the cultural influence. They'd never read Wordsworth or seen paintings by Turner or anything, but there was just a very direct kind of response to life and movement, and kind of the smells and the textures, and like a horse or a dog or something like that. And it also, that kind of really affirmed to me, beyond the kind of, the cultural side of nature and so on, there is this, and it's something that I explore in Losing Eden, this innate kind of genetic need that we have for the natural world, which, if you look around at our society, you might think it's pretty dormant. It certainly was for me for a long time before I kind of had this personal experience. But we lived in nature. Nature wasn't even a thing when we were hunter-gatherers, and it was our home for millennia. And I think that the research around the Biophilia Hypothesis, which kind of is the hypothesis that puts forward this idea that, because we evolved in nature, we have this kind of inbuilt genetic affiliation with the natural world, is really interesting. And like one of the studies that I included in the book is about kind of the shape of trees, and how even today, in the 21st century, people prefer trees that are the shape of trees like the Acacia tortilis that we would have evolved with in the savannah. There's this kind of innate appeal and draw to refuge, kind of prospect refuge, which is the idea that you can kind of a view around, so you can see if any predators are coming, and a refuge, so kind of a place that feels safe. I'm probably rambling a bit, but I just on the pre-verbal, the kind of, it's powerful to see a baby kind of react to nature, I think.
No, and I've fully encouraged the rambling, and not really rambling at all. It's again sort of relating to a lot of the different conversations I've had throughout this week, and it feels like it's kind of connecting all those dots, actually, because talking about that innate connection, and then as children perhaps grow up and society or school starts to perhaps remove them from that, and maybe it's as Indy was saying last night, maybe it becomes not cool, depending on who I guess you're mixing with, and teenagers perhaps, maybe, to even being told not to get dirty, not to get muddy, or all those different things. But equally, what struck me a lot from reading the book was just putting all these sort of quite stark statistics all together in one place, as to actually just how many people don't have access. And again, earlier I spoke to Ellen from Nature as a Human Right, who talks a little bit about all of that too, because that's her sort of main work, getting people access to green spaces. But how you put that all together in quite a clear way makes you realize that it's not just our own individual choices or individual actions, or you could even say to blame or fault. There's something quite endemic in our society, and how our towns, cities are built, and how we organize as a civilization now, I guess.
Absolutely. And this year has just put that inequality of access to nature in sharp relief. And environmental injustice is a public health crisis. We live in a society where not everyone has access to green space for a variety of reasons. You're more likely to have access to high quality green space. I hate that term, but I use it because it's in all the literature and so on. You know what I mean? You're more likely to access high quality green space if you live in an affluent area, and less likely if you're in a deprived area. So there's inequality of access across the board, and the more we know and learn about the profound health benefits, physical and mental, it seems like it's an injustice that not everybody has that access. I really hope that this year, that becoming so clear, and the fact that we're living in a world where pandemics are going to happen, I really hope that we will be able to see some political will to kind of to address that. One of my chapters in Losing Eden is called Echogenesis, and that's the name of this really kind of profoundly, someone described it to me as beautiful, which is a kind of strange way of describing like an academic paper, but this guy Rich Mitchell from Glasgow University studied communities in England which were disadvantaged but seemed to be doing better than expected health-wise, and they found that the determining factor was access to green space. And so they concluded in their paper that access to nature can actually shrink and reduce that terrible health gap that we have in our society between the rich and the poor. That paper was published in 2008, and things take a while obviously to change, but I'm hoping that as the science builds, that we might get to the point where we have politicians who care enough to recognise that our disconnection is very bad for our health and very unfair in terms of how our society is divided.
Yeah, it's definitely a concept that is quite big in the teaching of forest bathing, Shinrin-yoku, about it's not just about what we're receiving from nature, but also that reciprocal relationship and what we give back in connecting, and ultimately if we can connect, then we're more moved to protect. And it's funny, I have that personal dilemma, conflict maybe, when I'm leading a session. A lot of people come into the session because of needing to find some calm and needing to find some tools or tactics to essentially calm the nervous system, and sometimes at the end of the session, when we start to sort of explore that reciprocal relationship and what do we bring to nature, what do we give to nature, and it's a very open thing. I'm not sort of preaching and telling. I ask questions and see what comes up for people, and I always kind of have this thought in my head of how do you get that, how do you get people connecting and then starting to consider to be moved to protect, and by talking about just how little access that some people have and how badly we need it and how much we need to take action and get our governments, get our politicians to do something, but at the same time not overload people with extra eco anxiety when perhaps they're already struggling, and probably even more so this year. But again, from listening to you and from reading the book, it seems really the key is actually to keep working on inviting people to realize how important it is for our well-being, and that's perhaps the key.
I think it was probably Caroline Lucas who said, you're only going to protect what you love, and you're only going to love what you know, and you're only going to protect what you love. And there's another phrase by an American environmental educator, something like, climbing trees and loving trees precedes saving trees. And I think, it's, ideally we'd live in a society where all children, all people have that opportunity to, experience that awe and wonder, or peace and calm from the natural world, which then kind of leads on to, and the evidence suggests this, that if you experience connection with nature as a child, then you're more likely to have pro-environmental behaviours as an adult. But I think what you say about reciprocity and a reciprocal relationship is really interesting. It's definitely something that I've been thinking about a lot this year. Becoming so conscious of the fact that I go into my urban cemetery, which is my local green space, or the woods, and I take. I get so much from it. I just pitch up there and I expect my spirit to be filled, and it very much normally is. But it's really kind of the last, and I think that happened for about a few years, and then I fell into a state of kind of ecological grief and kind of climate dread, of just paralysis really about the state of the world. But it's only in the last year or two that I have become a lot more involved in thinking about how I can have more of a reciprocal relationship with the nature, and that's, for me, that's looked like being involved with my neighbours. We're rewilding like a patch of land behind our house, getting a bit involved in kind of local activism and trying to get trees planted on our street, tree planting days, so on, like things like that. And I found that deeply fulfilling and rewarding. And even like this year with the lockdown, we have managed to kind of successfully stop some trees being cut down, and we're getting trees planted. And you know, it's nothing in comparison to what I get from nature, which is my, you know, life support system, as well as basically my sanity. But it feels good, and I think that I really want to explore that reciprocity more and more. You know, how can I kind of be in more of a reciprocal relationship with the rest of nature? So I'm always up for hearing how other people feel about that and what they do, because I think, you know, in our society we're so disconnected in the kind of Western industrial society. Like, we don't have rituals or, you know, songs or stories or ways of having a kinship, and that's one of the reasons I spoke to the chief druid, and I've been quite interested in kind of druidry and those kind of practices which give you a bit of a template for, you know, for deepening that connection. Yeah.
Thank you. I feel like I could just want to ask you more and more things, but I've been trying to keep these conversations not too long, so I should get to the third question,
Okay.
which was, what advice would you give to others? And I guess that was in reference really to, perhaps now that we're in another lockdown here in the UK and in winter, or moving into winter, and if people want to connect to nature, or what would you say to someone?
Well, I think I feel a bit like weird about giving advice, because I'm always a bit like, I don't know, I don't want to be too prescriptive, because I know that everyone's relationship's different with nature and so on, and you know, there are obviously different like systemic barriers. But I suppose one of the things that I've learned from, you know, reading and researching, writing in this area for 8 or so years, is that you know, it's not a self-indulgence. It's not an indulgent waste of time thing to do. You know, I definitely felt that for many years, and I still have to push back on it. Of, you know, we live in a kind of hyper-capitalist society. I feel like if I'm not producing or, you know, being productive, being busy, making money, being part of the kind of consumerist world we live in, then I'm wasting my time in some way. But I think what I would say is that, like, the evidence, you know, the scientific evidence is so strong now and unequivocal. You know, even if you're not able to kind of access a grand wood or a grand forest, just walking through a kind of local green space on your way to a shop has been shown to, you know, buffer the stress of moving into an urban area. That's a study from Edinburgh. You know, and so not feeling like it's kind of something that, yeah, that's an indulgence. I think the other thing that I've really benefited from this year, probably because of the time spent outdoors, is thinking about all the senses. I mean, it's a kind of obvious one, but I've got so much from, I've been really focused on touch and smell. So recently I've been like picking, you know, pine cones from a larch tree and like rubbing the pine resin in my fingers and smelling it, and just kind of touching stuff more, being more tangible. I think that's taken a while. I think at the beginning, when I first kind of reconnected, it was very much like a visual relationship, and then it became more oral. I was more interested in birdsong and so on. But you know, we don't really talk about or use touch that much, and smell as well. But there's so much to smell. I think some of the most interesting studies that I found were ones like the one I mentioned about the smell of petrichor, and just like the smell of soil, which is filled with kind of potentially therapeutic microbacteria as well. So yeah, I'd say if you're out for a walk, or you might be a bit kind of bored, it might be the same walk, just think about the different senses, because you can really bring different dimensions to the experience. And then I've also found that kind of playing with the different types of day has deepened my connection as well. So trying to go out at dawn or dusk, and becoming more kind of mindful and conscious of the light, and realizing that my local green space is like a really, I mean, you probably go there and think, what's the big deal? It's an urban cemetery, it's by like a massive shopping mall. I love it. And there's nothing, I take people for walks there and I kind of say, isn't it amazing? And they're kind of like, well, it's okay, it's like a local park. But I think because I've spent so much time there, and I feel like I intimately know the beech tree and the larch trees and where the chestnut tree is, and and part of that has been going at different times of day, and also in different weathers. So I guess we're in November now, the weather looks pretty bad. If you're wanting to connect with nature, I'll finish on this, don't let the rain put you off. I got a pair of really cheap waterproof trousers, and I got a hat with a brim. I mean, I'm not going to win any style prizes for sure, but it has just meant that I can just keep going out, whatever the weather. And actually, things look so beautiful in the rain. Like, it looks so different. The woods, it smells different. It's covered in kind of diamonds. So yeah, I think those are the things that I've found helpful this year in deepening the connection.
Fantastic, thank you. I could just see there's been a few comments that have come in, and I'm just going to try and scroll back and find one. So we had Losing Eden is a simply stunning book, intricately researched and beautifully written. Any plans to return to Svalbard one day? Having been there myself, it's a magical place.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really kind. I'm so glad that you liked it. No plans right now, but I'd really like to go back. I only went for kind of 2 days or something, 3 days. I went in February. I'd really like to go in the summer. And yeah, it was quite a trek, as you all know if you've been there yourself. It's quite a journey. But the reason I went to Svalbard for Losing Eden was kind of because, in a way it sounds so far away because it's in the Arctic, but it's kind of the closest wilderness to us. It's like the last kind of wilderness of, well, it's kind of Europe. And I went there, I think when my daughter was about 6 months old, and I was like colossally sleep deprived. And I said to the hotel, like, you could put your name up if you wanted them to wake you up when the Northern Lights were appearing. And I've always wanted to see the Northern Lights. And I slept through the call. And I woke up and I'd had 12 hours sleep kind of for the first time in ages. And actually it was worth it. It was worth it having a good night's sleep rather than the Northern Lights. So what I'd like to go back to see the Northern Lights when I'm a bit less tired.
Oh, thank you, good answer. Let me have another look. There's another comment from Forest Bay, Wales. Thanks so much for this. Losing Eden is a masterpiece. Nature has been a huge solace for me this year, and enjoying training to be a forest bathing guide. Oh, excellent.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Okay, and I've got the book sounds fascinating. Thank you for sharing your insights.
Oh, pleasure. Okay. Thanks for listening.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I just feel so grateful to have been able to listen to you tonight, and I'm sure everyone else has as well. I wondered before I sort of wrap up and say goodbye, whether there's anything else that you wanted to add, or how people can perhaps follow what you're doing, or where they can buy the book, or anything else.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's such a nice such a nice way to spend a is it Sunday?
I think so.
I think it is Sunday, isn't it? Thank you, Ruth. It's lovely to talk to you. Yeah, I'm on Instagram, as you know, Twitter, Lucy Jones, and my book's for sale everywhere, I think. I mean, obviously, indie bookshops are always good. There's a new site called bookshop.org, I think. But I mean, if you want to buy my book, that's just lovely. And yeah, I hope if anyone reads it, then they find it interesting. The paperback comes out in February, I think. And I should have another book out sometime soon about children in nature. So if that's your interest too, then look out for that maybe. But yeah, thanks so much for having me, and it was lovely to chat.
Thank you, Lucy. I'll say goodbye. I'm going to loiter on here for a little bit longer and just tell people about who's on next week. So I'll say goodbye and thank you, Lucy.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye. Bye.
So yeah, thanks again to Lucy. Just to let you know quickly, next week, I've got someone every night next week as well. I'm amazed and grateful to everyone. Just to give you a quick idea, I have got a naturalist and therapist. I've got a forest bathing guide. I've got a bushcraft instructor, the digital detox coach. I've got a mindfulness teacher and a wedding celebrant. I think that's it next week. Thank you so much everyone for watching, and I'll be popping the video in my feed and linking everything to Lucy and her Instagram page as well, so you can follow her and find out about her next book too. Thanks.